In the glamorous world of high society, my marriage to Fu Jingshen, the crown prince of the Fu conglomerate, became the biggest joke of the year. They said I was a gold digger. They said I climbed my way up using tricks. But the truth was much simpler. Right now, in the drawer beside my bed, there is a neatly written marriage contract. Clear terms, black ink on white paper. 1 year. For 1 year, I must play the role of Mrs. Fu perfectly. No interfering in his personal life, no emotional attachment. When the time is up, we walk away from each other. In return, I receive 50 million yuan. With that money, I can return to Jiangnan, buy a small courtyard house with gray tiles and white walls, spend my days lying in the sun, eating snacks, and finally live the life I have always wanted. No ambition, no pressure, just living and sleeping. Because of that goal, my life principle in the Fu household is very clear. If I can sit, I will never stand. If money can solve it, I will never use effort. Scheming in a wealthy family wastes energy. Playing mind games causes stress and hair loss. Unfortunately, while I wanted to stay invisible, others insisted on dragging me into the spotlight. On my third day in the Fu residence, my bedroom doorbell rang sharply at 6:30 in the morning. The sound was crisp and relentless, cutting through the silence of dawn like a blade. Outside the window, the sky was still pale, the first light barely touching the edges of the garden. Downstairs, Ye Wanting, Fu Jingshen's stepmother, was already waiting. She sat in the living room with perfect posture, dressed in a silk qipao embroidered with blooming peonies. The soft sheen of the fabric caught the morning light. Her hair was pinned neatly, every strand in place, and her makeup was flawless, as if she had stepped out of a painting. The entire room seemed to revolve around her elegance. I looked at her, then down at myself. Wrinkled silk pajamas, messy hair tied into a loose bun, bare face, still heavy with sleep. I yawned without restraint, my voice slightly hoarse. "Shenlu," she said, her tone gentle but edged with cold authority. "You married into the Fu family without status. If you lack background, you must compensate with discipline." Her gaze lingered on me, sharp and measuring. "Fu Jingshen has a weak stomach. Starting tomorrow, wake up at 4 in the morning and personally cook abalone chicken porridge for him. You must prepare everything yourself. Wash the ingredients, control the heat, clean the kitchen, no servants. Only then can you prove your virtue as a proper wife." 4 in the morning. The number echoed in my mind. My brain instantly switched into calculation mode. Waking up that early meant losing 3 hours of deep sleep. My skin would dull, my energy would drop, and I would need expensive skincare to recover. Standing in the kitchen for hours would drain my strength. Oil fumes would cling to my hair, leaving it dry and lifeless. And worst of all, my cooking skills were non-existent. If I burned the porridge, Fu Jingshen, who was notoriously picky and obsessed with cleanliness, would definitely be displeased. Conclusion: cooking it myself would be a total loss. Yet Wanting was setting a trap. She wanted to exhaust me physically and use the result to humiliate me. I blinked slowly and put on an obedient smile. "Yes, Mother, you are absolutely right. He will have a perfect breakfast." She gave a cold, satisfied snort and stood up gracefully, clearly convinced that tomorrow morning would be my downfall. Too bad she underestimated my laziness. Back in my room, I did not hesitate for even a second. I climbed onto the soft bed, pulled the blanket over myself, and reached for my phone. From the drawer, I took out the black card Fu Jingshen had given me. Its surface gleamed faintly under the light, heavy with silent authority. Then I made a call. "Hello, Chef Tung. This is Shen Lu. Tomorrow morning at 5, please bring your team to Villa Number 1 at Peninsula Bay. Prepare abalone chicken porridge, light seasoning. Also include shrimp dumplings and siomai. Charge everything to my card. Thank you." The call ended. 2 minutes. The problem was solved with almost no effort. I placed the phone aside, adjusted my pillow, and closed my eyes again. sinking back into sleep as if nothing had happened. The next morning at 7:15, the dining room was filled with the rich aroma of premium ingredients. The scent of slow-cooked broth blended with the freshness of seafood, warm and comforting, drifting gently through the air. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the polished dining table. Ye Wanting sat at the head of the table, her posture still elegant, but her expression had changed. Her gaze moved from the steaming porridge to the delicate bamboo steamers, each dish arranged like a piece of art. Her lips twitched slightly. I walked down the stairs slowly, my steps unhurried. Instead of elegant clothing, I wore a fluffy brown bear pajama set. The hood had small round ears, and my slippers matched, soft and oversized. My hair was loosely tied, a few strands falling around my face. Why bother dressing up just to eat at home? Shen Lu, she snapped, her voice rising as she slammed her hand on the table. Did you make this yourself? And what are you wearing? I pulled out a chair and sat down, resting my chin lazily on my hand. I do not know how to cook, so I hired a professional chef. Her eyes widened in disbelief. I told you to do it yourself. This is wasteful and lazy. I poured myself a glass of warm milk, the steam curling gently upward. Mother, I said calmly, Fu Jingshen, health is extremely important. If I cook poorly and he gets sick, causing losses to the company, who will take responsibility? Using money to ensure safety is the most efficient decision. She opened her mouth, ready to argue, but no words came out. The logic sounded unreasonable, yet it left no room for rebuttal. At that moment, steady footsteps echoed from the entrance. Fu Jingshen walked in, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. His presence carried quiet authority, like a calm but powerful force. His features were sharp, his expression composed, though a trace of fatigue lingered in his eyes. He sat down beside me without a word and picked up a spoon. He tasted the porridge. The warmth spread through him, easing the discomfort in his stomach. His brows relaxed slightly, the tension in his expression softening. Seeing the moment, I reached into my pocket and took out the receipt. I placed it gently in front of Ye Wanting. Mother, since this was your idea, please settle the bill. The room fell silent. Even the air seemed to freeze. Her face changed color, anger flashing in her eyes. Before she could speak, Fu Jingshen set down his spoon and wiped his lips calmly. She is right, he said. My health matters more than formalities. Please pay the bill.
Ok, mình nối tiếp trực tiếp mạch bạn đang làm audio nhé. The next hour passed quietly inside the mansion. Servants lowered their voices as they moved through the hallways, as if the earlier scene had left a lingering pressure in the air. News traveled fast in a place like this. By now, almost everyone already knew what had happened at the breakfast table. I walked slowly along the corridor, my slippers making soft sounds against the polished floor. Sunlight poured in through the tall windows, stretching long shadows across the ground. Everything looked calm, elegant, and perfectly controlled, just like this family. But beneath that surface, every ick was a game, every word carried weight, and every small mistake could become a weapon. I pushed open the door to my room and stepped inside. The moment the door closed behind me, all the tension disappeared. I kicked off my slippers and dropped onto the bed without hesitation. Soft, warm, safe. This was my territory. No rules, no watching eyes, no expectations. I rolled over and pulled the blanket around myself, letting out a quiet, satisfied sigh. Honestly, dealing with people here was far more tiring than doing actual work. Too many hidden meanings, too many unnecessary battles, completely inefficient. If things could be solved with money, then waste emotions, that was my principle. And so far, it was working perfectly.
I closed my eyes, ready to drift back into sleep, but my phone suddenly vibrated beside me. I frowned slightly and picked it up. Unknown number. I stared at the screen for a second before answering. Hello? A brief Spanish came from the other end. Then a low, familiar voice spoke. You seem eyes open slowly. Fu Jingshen. I shifted state outside. His course. Then Yukon time. I thought about it for a second. Direct? Yes. Quen almost suckles. To what? I might the riff. I still the ahead to as words. A light's moment. Nothing was letting. And silence. Us enough. Inside the flaying by their rules. A faint knock came from the door. Not loud, not urgent, but precise. I opened my eyes slowly, staring at the ceiling for a few seconds before responding. Come in. The door opened quietly, and the same senior servant stepped inside. Madame, it is almost 9. The main hall is ready. I sat up reluctantly, my hair slightly messy, my expression still carrying traces of sleep. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but then I remembered. Old Madame. Right. This was not something I could skip. I let out a soft sigh and got out of bed. Fine, 10 minutes. The servant nodded and stepped back out, closing the door behind her. I walked to the mirror and looked at my reflection. Loose hair, sleepy eyes, soft pajamas. Completely inappropriate for a formal meeting. I tilted my head slightly, thinking, then shrugged. Too much effort. I tied my hair into a simple low bun, changed into a clean but plain dress, and slipped on a pair of flat shoes. Enough. No need to impress anyone. After all, this was just another task. I stepped out of the room and walked toward the main hall. The closer I got, the quieter it became. Servants stood along the sides, lowering their heads. No one spoke. The atmosphere felt heavier than before, as if something important was about to happen. When I reached the entrance, I paused for a second, then pushed the door open. The main hall was vast and bright. Sunlight filtered through high windows, casting soft light across the polished floor. At the center sat an elderly woman. Straight posture, calm expression, sharp eyes. Old Madame Fu. Even without saying a word, her presence filled the entire space. Beside her sat Ye, wanting her face composed again, but her eyes still carried a trace of coldness when she looked at me. And, standing slightly behind, was Fu Jingshen, silent, unreadable. I walked forward step by step until I stopped at the center. Then I gave a small, respectful nod. Good morning. Old Madame did not respond immediately. Her gaze rested on me, steady and deep, as if trying to see through everything. Seconds passed. The air grew heavier. Finally, she spoke. So, you are Shen Lu. Her voice was calm, but carried unquestionable authority. I met her gaze without avoiding it. Yes. Another pause. Then I heard what happened this morning. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You hired a chef. I nodded. Yes. The room fell silent again. Even Ye Wanting did not speak this time. She was waiting for the old Madame to make a judgment. Old Madame tapped her fingers lightly on the armrest, her expression unreadable. Then she asked slowly, Do you think you did the right thing? A simple question, but everyone in the room knew it was not simple at all. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I thought for a moment, then spoke calmly. Yes. A slight shift in the atmosphere. Bold. Too bold. Ye Wanting lips curved faintly, as if she had already seen the outcome. But old Madame only looked at me more closely. Why? Her voice was still calm. I lifted my gaze slightly. Because the goal was not cooking, it was his health. If the result is correct, then the method does not matter. Silence. This time, longer, heavier. Then suddenly, a faint sound. Old Madame laughed, not loud, but clear. Interesting. She leaned back slightly, her eyes still fixed on me. Most people in this house focus on rules. You focus on results. She paused, then added, "That is not a bad thing." Ye-wanting expression stiffened for a moment. Clearly, this was not the direction she expected. Old Madame continued, but her tone changed slightly. In this family, results alone are not enough. You must also understand balance. I listened quietly, not arguing, not resisting, just absorbing. She studied me for a few more seconds, then waved her hand lightly. "You may go." That was it. No punishment, no criticism, no approval either, just observation. I nodded slightly, understood, then turned and walked out of the hall. Behind me, the silence remained, but I could feel it, the difference. I was no longer invisible, and from this moment on, things would not stay simple anymore. The moment I stepped out of the main hall, the air felt lighter, but I knew that was only on the surface. Inside that room, something had already shifted, and once a piece moved on the board, it would not stop. I walked slowly back along the corridor, my expression calm as if nothing had happened. Servants stepped aside, lowering their heads. Their attitudes were even more careful than before. News traveled faster than footsteps in this house. By now, everyone knew old Madam did not punish me. That alone was enough to change how they saw me. I pushed open my room door and stepped inside. Silence again. Comfortable, familiar silence. I let out a small breath and sat down on the edge of the bed. Honestly, that meeting was more tiring than expected. Not because of pressure, but because of thinking. Every word in that room carried weight. Even silence had meaning. Too complicated. I lay back slowly, staring at the ceiling. This kind of life was exactly what I wanted to avoid. Power, rules, control. All of it felt heavy, unnecessary. 1 year. Just endure 1 year. I closed my eyes for a moment, but before sleep could take me, my phone vibrated again. This time, it was not an unknown number. It was a message from Fu Jingshen. I opened it lazily. Tonight, dinner at home. 7 simple words. Direct, efficient. Very much like him. I stared at the message for a few seconds, then typed a reply. "Do I need to prepare anything?" The response came almost immediately. "No." Pause. Then another message. "Just show up." I raised an eyebrow slightly. That sounded suspicious, but I did not think too much about it. Fine. I tossed the phone aside and rolled over, pulling the blanket up again. Dinner was still far away. No need to waste energy thinking. Sleep was more important. Outside, the sun slowly moved across the sky, time passing quietly. By the time I woke up again, the light had already softened. Golden, warm, late afternoon. I stretched lazily, feeling completely refreshed. Much better. I got up slowly, walked to the window, and looked outside. The garden was peaceful, trees swaying gently in the breeze. For a brief moment, everything felt almost unreal, as if this place had nothing to do with me. Maybe that was a good thing. The less attached I was, the easier it would be to leave. I turned away from the window and glanced at the clock. 6:30. Time to get ready. I opened the wardrobe and looked inside. Rows of expensive clothes neatly arranged. Elegant, delicate, perfectly styled. I stared at them for a moment, then reached for something simple. A light-colored dress, clean lines, no unnecessary decoration. Comfortable enough. I changed quickly, tied my hair loosely, and looked at myself in the mirror. Acceptable. No effort wasted. I walked out of the room and headed toward the dining hall again. This time, the atmosphere was different. Quieter, but more focused, as if something was waiting. When I stepped inside, I immediately noticed. The table was set for 2. Only 2. No wanting. No old madam. Just me and him. Fu Jingshen was already there, sitting at the table, his posture straight, his expression calm. He looked up when I entered, his gaze steady. You are on time. I walked over and sat down across from him. Of course, I do not like wasting time either. A faint pause. Then, neither do I. Dinner began quietly, simple dishes but clearly prepared with care. The atmosphere was calm, almost too calm. No tension, no hidden pressure, just silence. After a few minutes, he suddenly spoke. Tomorrow night there is a banquet. I looked up slightly. Banquet? Trouble. I could already feel it. He continued, You will attend with me. Not a question, a statement. I rested my chin lightly on my hand, thinking for a second. Do I have a choice? No, direct, as expected. I sighed softly. Fine. He watched me for a moment. You do not seem interested. I gave a small shrug. I prefer staying in bed. Honest, unfiltered. For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps. Then he said calmly, This is part of your role. I know. I picked up my glass, taking a small sip, acting like Mrs. Fu. 1 year, 50 million. Worth it. I lowered the glass and met his gaze. Any specific requirements? He thought for a moment. Then, just stay beside me. Do not cause trouble. I smiled slightly. That depends on what you define as trouble. A brief silence. Then, do not outshine me. I blinked once, then laughed softly. Relax. I have no interest in shining. I only care about efficiency. His gaze lingered on me again, deeper this time, as if trying to confirm something. Then he nodded slightly. Good. Dinner continued in silence, but this time it felt different. Not distant, not cold, just calm. And somewhere beneath that calm, something subtle was building. The kind of thing that could not be avoided. The kind of thing that would only become clear at the banquet tomorrow night. The music shifted slightly softer, slower, as the evening moved deeper into the night. People gathered in small circles, conversations flowing smoothly, but every now and then I still drifted toward us, waiting, watching. I stood beside Fu Jingshen, quietly observing the room. Lin Wan had not come back yet, but I could feel it. She would. People like her never walked away without a purpose. A server passed by with a tray of champagne. I took one glass, lightly holding it between my fingers, but did not drink. Just a prop. Across the hall, I finally saw her again. Red dress still striking, standing among a group of well-dressed guests. But her attention was not on them. It was on us, or more precisely, on me. Our eyes met briefly. She smiled, slow, confident, then turned to say something to the people beside her. A few seconds later, I noticed movement. A young woman walking toward us, holding a glass, slightly unsteady. Too unsteady. I watched calmly. Predictable. Very low-level method. When she got close enough, her steps suddenly faltered. Her body tilted forward. The glass in her hand tipped, liquid heading straight toward me. At the last second, I moved half a step to the side. Minimal effort. Perfect timing. The drink missed me completely. Instead, it splashed across the floor. A small gasp echoed nearby. The woman froze, her face pale. I looked at her quietly. No anger, no surprise. Just calm. Sorry. I am so sorry. Her voice trembled, but her eyes flickered for a brief second. Not fear, calculation. I set my glass down slowly. It is fine. No harm done. Simple, clean, no scene. But that was not enough, because the real target was never the drink. It was the reaction. If I got angry, I would lose composure. If I made a scene, I would look uncultured. If I stayed silent, I would appear weak. A small trap, too obvious. I glanced across the room. Lin Wan was watching. Of course. I turned back to the woman in front of me. You should be more careful. My tone was calm, not blaming, just stating a fact. She nodded quickly, still playing her role. Yes, I will. Before she could leave, I added softly, next time, if someone asks you to do this, choose the better target. Silence. Her expression froze. For a split second, her mask slipped. Then she lowered her head and hurried away. Around us, the people who had witnessed the scene exchanged subtle looks. No one spoke, but the message had already spread. I picked up a fresh glass from another tray, as if nothing had happened. Beside me, Fu Jingshen's voice came low. You noticed. I took a small sip, finally tasting the champagne. Too sweet, of course. His gaze stayed on me for a moment longer. Then, why not expose her directly? I lowered the glass slightly. Waste of time. Too much noise. I glanced briefly toward Lin Wan again. She had already turned away, her expression unreadable. Better to let her know that I know. That you then. A faint, almost invisible curve touched his lips. Haha, efficient. I smiled slightly. Always. The words changed again, signaling the start of the dance. Couples began to move toward the center of the hall. Lights softened, focusing on the floor. Fu Jingshen set his glass down. Dance, not a question. I whiffed at him for a second. He was serious. Of course he was. I placed my glass aside as well. Fine. He extended his hand. I took it. His grip was steady, warm, controlled. We stepped onto the dance floor together, movements slow, coordinated perfectly, as if it had been practiced. In reality, it had not, but I adapted quickly. Around us, people watched again, this time more openly. The new Mrs. Fu, the unknown woman, the one who did not follow rules, the one who did not lose. As the music carried us across the floor, I could feel the shift clearly. Attention, focus, interest, exactly what I did not want, but unavoidable. Fu Jingshen's voice came quietly near my ear. You are attracting attention, I replied just as softly. Not by choice. He paused slightly. Then, you are handling it well. I looked up at him, meeting his gaze. Of course, I do not like losing. For a brief moment, something deeper flickered in his eyes. Not just curiosity this time, recognition. The end. We stepped away immediately. Around us, the applause was light, polite, controlled. I released his hand first. Enough. He nodded slightly. We stepped off the dance floor together, but before we could move further, a voice stopped us again. Miss Shen. I turned. A middle-aged man approached, smiling warmly. Chairman Fu family. His eyes were sharp, despite the friendly expression. Young lady, you are quite impressive. I smiled lightly. Thank you, he chuckled. Not humble either. Interesting, another one, seeking another test. I could already tell tonight was far from over, and the deeper the night went, the more complicated it would become. The ring started just before dawn. It fell softly at first, like a whisper against the windows, then gradually thickened into a steady curtain that blurred the world outside. The garden, once sharp and precise, became a wash of green and gray, as if the entire Fu residence had been painted over with quiet. I stood by the window, wrapped in a light robe, watching the drops trace slow paths down the glass. 1 year. The contract had reached its final day. On the table behind me lay the same document that had once defined everything. The ink was still dark, the edges still crisp, but something about it felt distant now, like a story I had already lived through and quietly outgrown. 50 million yuan, a courtyard in Jiangnan, a life of stillness and ease. That had been the plan. Simple, clean, efficient. No emotions, no complications. But plans, I had learned, rarely survived unchanged. Behind me, the door opened without a sound. I did not turn around. I already knew who it was. His footsteps were steady, familiar now in a way I had never intended them to be. He stopped a few steps away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain filled the silence. It was strange. A year ago, silence between us would have felt cold, transactional. Now it carried weight, meaning. I finally turned. Fu Jingshen stood there, still composed as ever, dressed in a dark suit as if nothing in the world could ever disturb his order. But his eyes, they were different, less distant, less guarded, as if somewhere along the way he had forgotten to keep his walls intact. "The contract is over today," I said, my voice calm. "Yes," he replied, a simple word, but it lingered between us longer than it should have. I walked past him, picking up the document from the table. My fingers brushed over the paper once before I held it out. "You can have this back." He did not take it immediately. Instead, his gaze rested on me, searching, as if trying to understand something that had no clear answer. "Are you leaving today?" he asked. That was always the agreement. No hesitation, no attachment. I smiled slightly. That was the agreement. He looked at the contract again, then back at me. "And now?" His voice was quieter. "What do you want?" The question caught me off guard. Not because it was difficult, but because, for the first time, I had to answer it without hiding behind a plan. Outside, the rain softened again, turning into a gentle drizzle. I thought about Jiangnan, the white walls, the gray tiles, the slow afternoons under the sun. A peaceful life, a safe life. Then I thought about this house. The absurd mornings, the quiet meals, the way he had started sitting beside me without needing a reason, the way I had stopped counting effort and started noticing moments. Somewhere along the way, something had changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly, like rain soaking into the ground. I lowered the contract. "I still want that courtyard," I said softly. His expression did not change, but I saw the slight tightening of his hand. Then I continued. "But maybe not right now." Silence again. Different this time. Lighter. As if something unspoken had finally found its place. I walked closer and placed the contract back on the table instead of into his hand. "We can tear it," I said, "or we can keep it. Either way, it does not really matter anymore." For the first time since I had met him, Fu Jingshen let out a quiet breath, almost like a laugh. "You are changing the terms again." I tilted my head slightly. "I am just optimizing the outcome." That familiar line. But this time, it carried something else beneath it, something warmer. He looked at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out, not for the contract, but for my hand. His grip was firm, steady, real. No conditions, no clauses, just a choice. "Stay," he said. "Not as part of an agreement. Stay because you want to." The rain outside finally stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling into the room in soft golden lines. I looked down at our hands, then back at him. And for once, I did not calculate the cost. I did not weigh the gain. I simply smiled. "Okay," I said. "No contract, no deadline. Just, let's see what happens." On the table, the paper remained untouched, its purpose quietly fading. And in that moment, for the first time in a year, my future was no longer something I had planned. It was something I was willing to feel. And somehow, that felt even better than 50 million yuan.